All right, hey guys, welcome to the show. Today I'm joined by, the legend Anatoly Yakovenko from Solana. Anatoly, it's great to have you on, man. Thanks so much for joining.
For sure. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, so before we dive in too deep, could you just give us like a quick background, your background story, why you built Solana, and kind of your mission in crypto?
For sure. So spent most of my career as an engineer at Qualcomm. I was there back in like the flip phone 2 megabyte device days and left when my team was building out augmented reality for, the supercomputer you hold in your hand. So I got to see in a span of a decade this crazy technological leap driven by hardware manufacturers like TSMC and Mobile at Qualcomm. And Solana, the idea for it and kind of like the secret sauce and what people have heard of is called proof of history. That came out in kind of late 2017. I had 2 coffees and a beer. It's up till 4 in the morning, and I had this eureka
Story.
moment. Yeah, I couldn't sleep for like a week after that. It's pretty interesting moment where I realized that you can encode passage of time as a data structure.
Mhm.
Um, and that's a pretty significant thing because mathematically there is no arrow of time. Einstein equations, they work forward and backwards in time, and there's no like true representation of time moving forward. And later I found out that there's amazing folks working on these things called verifiable delay functions, and this is really what proof of history is. And we're using it in a very different way than any other projects that we've seen use VDFs. Is we're using it specifically as a Lamport clock or a source of time outside of consensus in the network. And this is why CDMA, TDMA, those 2G cellular networks, 3G, and everything on use time as a source of coordination between all the transmitters in the network. So intuitively, remember physics, radio waves interfere. So if you have 2 towers transmit at the same time or the same frequency, you get noise. So when 2 block producers produce a block at the same time, you get a fork. And it's equivalent to noise because you don't know what state the information is and what state the network is, what information was supposed to pass through. So in radio and TDMA, people alternate by time. They give each tower a very synchronized clock. In permissionless blockchains, it's hard to do because we don't have a true source of time. There isn't like a clock we can all look up at and say, okay, right now is 12 p.m. or whatever. Like you trust somebody to give you that source of time. So this is where this VDF comes in. It's a trustless way for time to move forward in this network. And once we had that, I kind of knew, okay, there's a way to build high performance blockchains. And I was lucky enough to have a bunch of folks that I worked with over a decade join me and come build this thing with me.
Yeah, it's awesome. Thanks for that background story. And, I would think that your, previous jobs and, working on really high scale communication servers. And, I think that has really helped the overall mission of Solana and, building a actual scalable blockchain. My next question for you, Anatoly, is what do you think of the difference in kind of building a community and focusing on that aspect of things versus trying to get that community mostly just from your tech, building up that tech and, growing success that way?
Yeah, community building is hard. And like funny anecdote, I play this sport called underwater hockey. No one ever heard of it, but it's got a very dedicated community. And every city that you go to, there's a small underwater hockey club, basically, of people that are like so in love with this game and that they tell all their friends about it. They tell, they like try to get this thing to grow, but it's still like 30, 40 people at best per city. So maybe like 5,000 in the US.
Yeah.
And that process was very similar to building this blockchain because we got to go find validators that understand what we're doing, that fall in love with this design and like are like geek out on this with us, that actually like roll up their sleeves, build these boxes, drive to a data center somewhere, right, locally, and go deploy them. It's a bunch of work, right? You got to like make them true believers. And in those early days, it was really just the people that are in love with the space. A lot of them came from Cosmos. A lot of them were, you know, originally mining Ethereum or Bitcoin, and this is how they got a feel for being able to build these things with their hands and participate in this kind of something bigger. And that was really the of our community, is like those folks.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think one thing that Solana and yourself and Raj has done a really good job at is, actually interacting with the community, being on crypto Twitter, being available through DMs and, mentions and stuff like that. You don't see that across every project in crypto, unfortunately. And so I think that has played a really big role, in kind of the success of Solana and the whole entire community.
Yeah, for sure. That's I try to respond to as much stuff as I can, and like emails, DMs, try to be as open as possible. Because the space is still so small, right? It's just, you go to every conference, you see the same people over and over, you know.
Yep. Yeah, definitely. So yeah, what is the Solana team doing to kind of foster adoption or make adoption easier? Some of the tooling is still relatively new, a little rough around the edges, and a lot of previous developers in the crypto community, were writing in Solidity, and Solana is built using Rust, and that kind of learning step is a little bit steep. So yeah, what is Solana team doing to kind of help this adoption and make it a little bit easier?
Yeah, there's so in my experience, what I found as an engineer, like at Qualcomm, was that it's more important to build like something that people are willing to go through all the trouble to use than to try to eliminate all the possible ways that would stop them. Like
Yeah.
the fact that you have to learn Rust, kind of a pain, but every engineer is supposed to learn a new stack every 2 years. It's just part of life, right? Like that kind of stuff is just, if we focused only on eliminating the barriers to entry, we would actually not build a thing that people have something worthwhile to cross all the barriers, right, to get to.
Yeah.
So we've been really focusing more on the, let's build an awesome layer one, make it as fast and as cheap as possible, and optimize the hell out of the user experiences. Like Phantom is a really great wallet. So that team that we've been working with pretty closely, super proud of everything they've accomplished. And things like that, I think, is what make it possible for folks to just kind of cross that bridge,
Mhm.
And because software is inherently scalable, you see folks like Armani and the Sabre team, once they cross that bridge, all the software that they've built is reusable by the next people. They've kind of laid the groundwork for all those libraries to be reused in the next project. So that's been really exciting to watch. It's like once you get like 5 or 6 really good teams that are like focused on product and share their like intermediate libraries and tools, it becomes very scalable very quickly.
Yeah, definitely. Big shout out to Armani for creating Anchor, a framework for Solana. It's been really useful, and I know it's helped a lot of people on Twitter and stuff as well. So big shout out to him. And yeah, so kind of my next question is like, what are your thoughts on changing the user's kind of perceptions of things? For example, I'm sure you have strong feelings about people labeling Solana as like Ethereum killer, and so on. And then like another example is Serum. Most people label Serum as just like a fast DEX or decentralized exchange, but really it's a lot more than that. Serum is really like an on-chain order book and matching engine that powers an entire ecosystem of trading related apps. So yeah, what are your thoughts on trying to change that user's perceptions a little bit?
The ETH killer one is really hard because the media and everybody wants to like pin. They want like a fight,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
that then there's like something to write about, right? Who's winning. this season or whatever.
Mhm.
I think it's I think it's interesting because the engineers like myself and like the ETH2 engineers, I'm friends with some of them. Like, we've met through conferences, we discussed like really hard, challenging problems, and it's like, Windows engineers and Linux kernel engineers were friends. Like that's just what happens, right? You work on the same problems, you share like a lot of experiences. You don't have this like fight in you
Yeah,
between the on the engineering side. Um, in the community, though, I think it's that tribalism is a little bit toxic. Um,
I
it
definitely
can be
agree there.
it can be beneficial when people are like punching up, like that they're arguing with passion and conviction and make strong case, for what they believe in.
Mhm.
I think that's great, and that really sharpens everyone, like because the big challenges are outside of crypto. How do we build a bank that has no account fees, no overdraft fees, but is scalable to 100 million, normal people, right? Like
Yeah.
that there's so much value to be created there, right? Like how
Mhm.
do we actually accomplish that? We need to be the best of what crypto has, right? Like it really needs to be awesome in every layer of the stack. So if we focus like the criticisms on that, like moving the industry into that direction, I think it's totally fine. We should fight each other a bit,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's challenging. Um, the perception of us as an ETH killer, I think, will fade. Um, there's always been some story of an ETH killer, but reality is that like if you have an amazing open source community of people that will work on this stuff on their own time on the weekend because it's fun, right?
Mhm.
They love it. It's
Yeah.
impossible to kill that, right? There's no way we could be an ETH killer,
Yeah.
because like at some point, like I think ETH is cool, right? Like that so that part of it is I think will fade just simply because ETH is not going to build. And
Mhm.
I think Solana community is in its early stages, and I'm hoping like at this pace that we get to a point where Solana is also unbelievable, right? Like there's so many people that love working on this project and the tech that you're not going to stop them from putting in their free time in the weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally agree there. While we're talking about some of the other chains, since DeFi summer in like 2020, the ongoing number of hacks and exploits has really just continued to grow on chains like, Ethereum, Binance Smart Chain, and a few other EVM compatible chains. I think these exploits have, totaled like $400 million or something in total losses. So far, I haven't, correct me if I'm wrong, but so far I haven't seen any exploits on Solana. What do you make of this?
Knock on wood, man.
Yeah, yeah,
I think it's
definitely knock
dumb.
on wood. What
I
do you
think
make of
it's
this? Do you
dumb.
think this has something to do with the EVM compatibility, or do you think it's more than that?
Partly. So attackers they've optimized their tooling towards EVM. So there's a bit of dumb luck that the EVM chains have so much more TVL that they're a much bigger target.
Mhm.
Um, there's a little bit of benefit in the Solana design, is it kind of borrows some of the best practices of what you should be doing in smart contract development, which is stateless contracts that implement, the logic, and then state is totally separate. That kind of thing is just the only way you can build them in Solana.
Yeah.
Um, that's not going to stop somebody from like copying and pasting a protocol which is open source, redeploying it with a few innovations that just miss something, right? Like
Yeah.
miss a check math that causes an overflow. There's no way to stop people from like foot gunning themselves. um so far the teams that we've seen launch, because there's a barrier to entry, like you have to go learn Rust, you have to be committed to the vision that this is important. um they've been folks that take the time to do audits and talk to us, to peer reviewers, and follow best practices. So I'm hoping all of the above will keep it that way. Like I think the hacks are just really, really unfortunate.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
there's no like solution outside of running a centralized service provider that that provides that safety net. I don't know how else you can do it. It'd be interesting if there was like a DAO driven stable coin that simply took other stable coins like USDC or whatever, and then spit out one that had this clawback security hack prevention that could be governance run, right? The hack happens, that can revert some of these losses. But that's a really complex thing. Like no one has built that, not because people haven't had this idea, but because the complexity of deciding what is the actual hack, who owns what piece of it, how do you revert the stuff and find the original owners? It's massively complicated on the technology and kind of social coordination problem.
Yeah, absolutely. That's definitely an awesome idea. I actually hadn't thought of that too much. So definitely have to think on that one a little bit more. So let's dive into the hackathons. This has been something I think has been a major success for Solana. I have the numbers here. Basically, in the first Solana inaugural hackathon, there were 1,000 submissions. 1,000 registrations and 60 submissions. In the Solana and Serum DeFi hackathon, there were 3,000 registrations and 100 submissions. And then in the most recent Solana season hackathon, there were 13,000 registrations and over 350 project submissions at the end. Is this kind of your main way to market to the developer community and try to get them to onboard onto Solana? Because I just think that it's really an awesome concept of having a ton of developers come in, have access to some of the teams, have access to potential money and grants and marketing help and all of that. And I really don't see the same level of activity on other chains, with the hackathons and stuff. So could you touch on, your main strategy with these hackathons?
Yeah, I don't. It's weird. I don't know what we're doing that's special there. I'm like blown away by the success of it. There isn't like anything behind the scenes that's like secret sauce to it. It's just okay, let's do another hackathon. And like the success has been maybe because it's not EVM, like maybe that's like a driver to it, because there's a lot of engineers that just love different languages. Rust is voted as the #1 loved language on GitHub, by GitHub engineers. And if everything is EVM and now they see a new thing that's like, oh, I can go code in the language that I love, let me just try it. That may be just enough to have started this snowball effect. And the hackathons provide kind of a time for everybody to be in the same place at the same moment on Discord and help each other, right, and start working together. And a lot of those teams are folks that formed in the hackathon, so they didn't actually know each other before. I believe Mango is just like a couple guys that are like, oh, okay, let's go build this thing.
It's crazy. It's crazy. Yeah, it's awesome. I really have been excited to, every single hackathon so far. I've looked through, all the submissions, read through them, and tried to,
So,
kind of
so
pinpoint
appreciate it. This
Yeah,
is the hardest, like people don't realize how hard that job is to actually go through and do like quality due diligence,
yep,
try the product, see what is like copy paste and see what is
yep.
actually a real team with real people behind it. It's really tough.
Yeah, it's just been awesome to see the number of working products in the Solana ecosystem right now. That's one thing that really brought me to the ecosystem, is that there weren't very many promises of what's going to come out in the future. Like you don't see that a ton in the Solana ecosystem. Like most projects that I came across, I could try out right there, which was a huge game changer because yeah, there's just a ton of working products, and it's been super impressive with all the teams that are building here.
Yeah, culturally, we called it fire-driven development. You only work on the thing that's on fire right now and fix that.
Yeah.
So there's like no time to like roadmap and like pretend that we're gonna launch something in 6 months. Realistically, like any complex project, you can't predict anything more than 6 weeks out. And
Yeah.
that's like, and then it's 50-50 if it lands or not.
Yeah, especially in crypto. I mean, things are changing on a daily basis,
Yeah.
and it's just insane. Um, let's see. So before we kind of wrap things up, I have a couple more questions, if you don't mind. Recently, Solana Labs has partnered with Metaplex and Audius to, create the Creator Fund. Could you speak on that a little bit and what you guys are trying to do with that?
Yeah. Like artists are, very few artists make a lot of money. And there's a very long tail of amazing creative artists that you listen to them on a daily basis on Spotify that barely scrape by or have another job. So these, the $5 million fund, the number may sound small compared to like, DeFi venture fund that's investing backs, but for artists, $20,000, it makes a huge difference in their life. So the goal there is to find these amazing folks that want to start moving into crypto and find ways to, earn a living there. Because as you see, like, NFTs and a bunch of other kind of crypto projects that are not DeFi, right? It's just art and people connecting with artists. There's a lot of opportunity for growth there. It's a new marketplace. It's not centrally controlled. It'd be amazing to see like these folks find a home there. So for us, it's just really like, let's find these people that want to take the plunge, and maybe this is the thing that gets them to cross that bridge.
Yeah, absolutely. That's awesome. As an artist myself, I just love the idea of kind of how NFTs have changed, revenue options for artists in terms of music and even digital art. Like, you used to could make digital art, and I mean, there's nowhere that you could actually sell that or make any money from it unless you're doing like, gaming design and stuff like that. Um, so it's really just awesome to see how NFTs have changed that aspect, as well as like the ongoing royalties for, artists in general. I think that's awesome. And it's definitely going to be interesting to see some of the people that you bring in through the fund that are actively on, creating a Metaplex store or, uploading to Audius and stuff like that. Very exciting
Yeah.
stuff. And
This is where, like, I think lowering the barrier to entry is way more important than I think than for engineers that kind of have the tools to unblock themselves. Like, there's a very small cross section of artists that actually know how to code. So eliminating as much of that as possible for them, I think it will go a long way to bringing them into the space.
yeah, absolutely. That's a very good point. And does the Creator Fund, does it have anything to do with Lollapalooza? And was that kind of like an inspiration or like correlation between the two there, or was that just a whole separate kind of
I think
partnership
that
that you guys wanted to do?
I think that's I'd have to check with the Metaplex folks. I think it was a separate thing, but like just like a way to spread awareness.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That was awesome to see the Solana logos at Lollapalooza. Were you actually at the event?
I grew up in Chicago. This was like one of the coolest events.
Nice.
But I'm in the Bay Area now, so it was hard for me to travel there, and so kind of sad I missed it.
Yeah.
It's sad to see like all of this cool stuff happening when I'm like 40. Like, so, but yeah, it's pretty awesome. I'm glad we got a chance to do that.
Yeah, no, I was definitely feeling a little FOMO. Wasn't able to go out to Lollapalooza or anything, but yeah, I definitely will try to be out to Lisbon at the Breakthrough event or Breakthrough. Sorry for
Breakpoint.
Breakpoint. There you go. Um, Definitely looking forward to that. I'm sure you'll be there as well as some of the other team members at Solana Labs. So definitely, if you're listening to this podcast and haven't yet, definitely check into the tickets. They just went live a couple days ago, and I'm sure they'll sell out really fast. So, to wrap things up, Anatoly, could you give me, one thing that you think that you've learned kind of throughout your journey, whether that be, when you were younger or more recent, that kind of helped you, find success in a path that you are really passionate about?
Yeah, it takes a surprising long amount of time to get to make us something successful. Like
Yeah.
you kind of have to commit and you both have to commit to a thing for like years, right? 3-4 years, and then be lucky that that thing actually becomes what's important. So that luck you can't control, but you gotta, like, commit to something. So pick something that you like. That's what's gonna get you. That's what's gonna get you through the cold winter, right? Which will inevitably come in your project. So like, that it's funny, like this is all the stuff you read, like in all the self guidebooks or
Yeah.
VC books. Like, you got to be really passionate, you got to have vision, you got to like push through until that moment. You don't believe it until you experience it.
Yeah,
But
definitely.
if you're chasing the market, you should just think of yourself as a trader. Like, this is the hot thing, so this is the trade I'm making versus another one, and that's a whole different mindset. And totally is also kind of an important part of everything. But as a builder, find what you're passionate about, even if it like does barely exist right now. Like social networks on blockchains, nobody uses them, right? Like, barely exist. Who knows? In 3-4 years, it may be the most important thing.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. Yeah, Anatoly, man, I really appreciate you coming on. This is a great conversation, and really looking forward to continuing our relationship and seeing how big Solana can grow. So, thanks a lot, man. I
For
really
sure.
enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you, man. Glad to have had the chance to talk to you. Right.
Yeah, man, it's awesome. I'm glad that we finally got to talk face to face after talking on Twitter for a while now. So,
Yeah.
it's been great.
Cool.